Okay, my name is Dean Wolslagel. I live in Kingman, Arizona. This is end of September 2009. Oh, it's actually 2010. Skip my years. This video is an information video provided for the public benefit. I used to be the city water conservationist for the city of Kingman a couple of years ago, and when I was water conservationist, I was assigned duties beyond that capacity to audit the city water system and to report back to the state in regards to the state water conservation requirements. During that audit process, the city let me see all aspects of the city water system. I was required to audit all wells, all piping, all plumbing, everything in the city that might have a leak or something that might require an issue of, at the time it was money. We wanted to save money and save water. But unfortunately, the audit turned out to be a little more than I anticipated. Being new to Kingman, I'd only been to Kingman for 4 years. I wasn't aware of the political backdrop of the water department, or the city administration for that matter, or even the county for that matter. The concern this video is being made to is the public is not being made aware of hazards to the community by public officials who seem to be, well, for no other word for it, they seem to be self-employed. We seem to have lost our public service sector of the city. What we have is, like many small cities across America and the world, I think, is that we've got a grip of fear that if you speak up about issues in your community and the leaders of that community don't want you to speak up about it, they squelch it. And it's the basic principle of our entire country, freedom of speech. Our founding fathers knew that if we can't speak, then we'll be repressed, and repression leads to tyranny. And it sounds crazy, but little communities are where that kind of action happens. So what I'm going to explain is the audit and how I came across these, what appears to be, and they are, by law, violations of the Clean Water Act, federal laws, and state laws. What I first did was I went around to each operations of the city internally with the staff, and I just took records. How much water's flowing, when does it flow, how much the water tanks hold, normal stuff in a water audit. We call it water audit. And I correlated the data, but I also took photographs. The city issued me a camera. And then they made me staff photographer for the water department and the city public works department. That was their greatest error, because what they didn't understand was I was brought up like a Boy Scout, and in the Boy Scouts we taught trustworthiness, and basic principle of public service is you serve the public first and foremost. You don't serve your manager over the public's best interest. Unfortunately, one of the first things I discovered was the staff. The staff were afraid. I don't know why, I didn't understand it at the time, but the staff were starting to feed me information. I wouldn't have found anything I found out that's now in federal court without the staff's help. I don't have x-ray vision. But what the staff did was they used me as a channel to vent out things they knew that happened in the past and in the present that they don't like and they can't control because they fear the management's reprisal. The reprisal of the city management to attack someone who speaks is in direct conflict with the federal government's rule of the whistleblower protection law. It's a federal act, Whistleblower Protection Act. The government created that law so that whistleblowers, people call them rats or whatever, but this is for protection of 43,000 people, their water supply. And what I discussed with the management before they removed me from the office, from my public job, was that they were violating the basic principle of public trust by not disclosing hazards or not acting in a manner that would protect the public. They are in fact violating their oath of office, and that's a serious item. I didn't understand the politics of it. I didn't get moved to Kingman for politics. I moved here to relax and get away from stress. So what I did was I discovered that the city, like most small cities, used too much water. Okay, that's normal. We see that all the time. And they prefer to use it on the golf course. The golf course is our #1 user of water in the city. That wasn't unusual either. But what I didn't understand was the complex political entanglements, or spider web as we like to call it, of the people who want the golf course to be a certain fee structure and the rest of the community to be another fee structure. What I discovered inadvertently in the audit was it's very difficult to describe, but it's a segregation of the community versus what we want in our society. What we want is people to be treated fairly and equally. And when you buy water, you don't expect that if you live in this part of the county or this part of the city, you pay more because you live in that part. That's not equal protection of the law. So that's one aspect I noticed, that the fee structure was based on where you live and your poverty level. What it seemed to be, after the audit was complete, was I noticed that the pipes in the lowest area of the community, lowest income area of the community, were neglected. Now, what I discovered was not my discovery. It was actually staff informing me of this. They came to my office when nobody else was around. They told me about these things, and they didn't agree with it. But they felt powerless, and they knew I had connections in Washington, D.C., and they thought that I could do something about it. So I said I would try, and so I pursued my internal investigation and find out what these concerns really were about, if they were valid. Well, what I discovered was the water pipes in the county area north of the city were put in during the war and just after the war, and a lot of them were 2-inch steel pipes. The concern of the staff was that those pipes needed to be replaced 10 years ago. The city decided, evidently, by my audit, was they decided that it was not in the interest of the downtown community or the golf course, or whoever benefits by this, to divert $900,000 a year. And that $900,000 came from a staff member, a supervisor in the water department. Mr. Steele gave me that number, and that's on record. That's in the transcripts of a recent federal hearing on March 31st, 2010. Mr. Steele admitted under oath that, yes, that's about the amount that the city was pumping into the county area to repair those old pipes that the poor population were being served by. Now, that's not unusual. You see that all the time. That's called economic discrimination. You know, your poor area, you don't get the service. But what was wrong with the whole thing was that we had the money. We still have the money. When I did the audit, I found out that $8 million was reported to the public for water operations costs. But in fact, it was only $4 million, a little over $4 million when I completed it. The city inadvertently gave me paperwork which they had to show me the amount of water pumped, and in that same column, in another column, was the amount of money involved. And that's what got my attention. Now, I wasn't supposed to audit the financial department. I was just supposed to add up the water cost, but one and the same. Well, when I saw the reports coming from the financial director, Carol Lloyd, telling the public that the cost of the water was $8 million, and that was justification for raising rates because they needed more money. They said the government was crying for more money. But I could see clearly that they're making almost 100% profit. Why would our operations claim that? Well, evidently they, like many cities, they divert funds out of the water department. This would be legal if it was under the municipal code, but it isn't. According to the municipal code that I have, and I do have now and had before, is that they can only divert 1/3 of the finances from the city water department. I mean, 1/3 of the cost of certain city departments out of the water fund. Now, the fund is a separate fund. So, but what I found out in audit was they're actually taking 100%. Let's say the engineering department, city engineering department. There's a department that does streets, buildings, permits, everything. Engineering does engineering. But 100% of their budget, the $2 million, was from the water fund. In essence, water customers in the county, the poorest being charged the most, and average 30% more for water, were paying for the engineering department for the city. But they weren't receiving those benefits. That's called taxation without representation. Now, I reported these discrepancies that I found while I was on staff at the city. And I was naive. I was under the assumption that this was California. Now, I've dealt with California officials, and they have protective departments built into the state government, which may seem bureaucratic and cumbersome, but there's a reason for those departments. Arizona has no such protection, evidently. There is no labor department. There is no voice for the workers, let's say. And what I found was the millions of dollars that was being diverted to downtown, I never did find out where it all went. I just knew that $2 million was going to engineering, and that I didn't feel comfortable with it, but it wasn't a safety concern to me at the time. I didn't correlate the diversion of funds out of the county, poor county area, to, let's say, higher paying salaries for the staff to be a safety concern. But it really was, because by not repairing those rusty lines, they were endangering innocent people in the county, especially children, because the contaminants that we find in that part of the county where those lines were are in alleys, old alleys. The pipe, the staff called me out to take photographs, and they did it deliberately. A lot of good people working for the water department, but they're afraid. They called me out there to take photographs under the realm of to cover our tracks. They were just saying, well, we're calling Dean out to take pictures for training. Well, they knew if I took pictures of something bad, I would keep it for other reasons. So they knew that. So they called me out. I took pictures of the pipe. I found out that the 2-inch water lines that feed the alleys, which feed all those small mobile homes, the poorer community, was basically defunct. It was had no impermeability to contaminants. It was only about a foot deep, and the alleys were filled with dog feces, animal feces, and dead animals, right on top of the water line. And the water lines constantly leaked, and they constantly flooded the alleys. The crews were constantly making repairs. They could only make patchwork repairs. The $900,000 for the full repairs was diverted to other things downtown. So the county residents were being deprived of equal protection, in my opinion, and I think anybody else's opinion. But because they're weak, they can't vote for the city council. They have no voice in their water bill. They have no rights. That's why we have the ACC. Unfortunately, the ACC doesn't regulate government. They only regulate private water companies. That's our weakness in this state. So I found these discrepancies, and I reported them to management, and then in December of 2007, all hell broke loose. Just one bad thing happened after another. I got called out to that same county area that I was just described, to a resident who complained of something in their water. And I was dispatched because the staff at that time still trusted me just to not say anything, just go out and take the report. Well, they had already dispatched me to a issue with the Army base at the airport when we had the Army base here. The Army was complaining, the sergeant was complaining of bad taste in the water, bad smell. Well, this is the same kind of call. So I went out there to a bad taste, bad smell water, found the same alley that I was suspecting that I knew what the issue was, and went in there, took a water sample, and it's a small jug of water, and in the water sample was a flake of algae coming right out of the water tap in their back bathroom, which was closest to our water supply line. Well, I reported that I had found that, and I'd also found the same exact thing 2 weeks earlier up that same alley just down the street in the same alley. So it was about 5 doors down on the opposite side. Well, the concern was, why are we getting algae in the water supply? We're supposed to chlorinate the water. Chlorine would kill the algae. The real problem was that pipe being rusted out like that and having no impermeability protection chlorine does not work, because there seems to be influx of contaminants in and out of the pipe. The pipe picture was absolutely, in fact, I have a